Okay, welcome everyone. Hello and good day to everyone joining us from all across the world today. On behalf of the IFAP Academy, I'm Praveen Chopra, and as Head of Scientific Affairs, it is my privilege to welcome all of you to this episode of Conversations with the Academy. Kit, can I have the next slide, please? With the world today grappling with the realities of re-emerging from the ravages of COVID-19, the imperative is to refocus attention on the many influences of healthcare systems, of healthy living, and of longevity. Since time immemorial, the mystique of immortality has enamored poets, philosophers, and scientists alike, seeking the elixir of living longer and healthier lives, gracefully. But recent times have accentuated the increasing syncretic dynamics of optimized healthcare systems, disease burdens, and the economies of globalization, which have underscored the demand for not only adding years to life, but adding life to years. Next slide. Now, how does one aspire towards the nirvana of successfully navigating society, politics, and businesses through the emerging population dynamics? How does one harness the global trends into meaningful interventions for improving patient community outcomes? How does one dispense with traditional mindsets and practices to critically align siloed stakeholders to champion the biopharmaceutical innovation today and access targeted towards living longer and healthier lives? And to help us negotiate the intricacies of emerging scenarios, we are indeed dignified with a preeminent faculty today, sharing their learnings with us. But before we launch into the discussion, a few housekeeping notes. We will follow our usual conversational slide and format. Clearly, the subject has engendered considerable interest with around 200 registrations in advance, and several questions have already been posed to the faculty, which we hope to address as we go along. And notwithstanding, the audience could always challenge the faculty with questions, and you can see the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. Do it in real time, and we will pick that up and throw it at the faculty. And look out for the poll questions. Keep in mind that the session is being recorded, which will be made available for on-demand viewing on the Academy website. And now, allow me the privilege of introducing Dr. Paul van den Broek, moderating today's deliberations. Next slide, Kit. Now, if I were to look at my own experience with Paul, we're going back many, many years, and I've had the privilege of experiencing his facilitation and his faculties ever since the early days together at Pfizer, when Paul drove the flagship international clinical development program for Lipitor. And today, Paul is a chief medical officer with Pfizer's hospital business unit and has devoted decades spearheading clinical development, medical strategy, and medical affairs, while on leadership assignments with Pfizer across the globe. He has passionately championed the development of therapeutic solutions with particular emphasis for diseases of the developing world, even as he advocated the cause of balancing science, ethics, and good business practices, a rare attribute afforded by his medical background, which has been augmented by training in business administration and pharmaceutical medicine. Add to this his senior medical roles based in Asia, one realizes Paul's proclivity for cultures and several languages, bringing a truly global perspective to his interactions. Paul is also on the board of the American Federation for Aging Research and the World Demographic and Aging Forum, where he leads the Longevity Council, amongst others. And this positions him uniquely to be able to opine on today's critical discourse. Thank you, Paul, for driving our aspirations for today's conversation and for introducing our panelists. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Praveen. And it's a real pleasure to be here today and to talk about the subject that I have a very passionate interest in, and that interest only increases as I get older, of course. So it's also a real honor for me to be here with two experts on aging and the impact of demography on the world. And so Hans Groth, who is the chairman of the board of the World Demographic and Aging Forum in St. Gallen, Switzerland. He's also a member of the board of directors of the rehabilitation clinic at Bad Zurzach, And he has been, since 2009, a guest lecturer at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. And he was also a member of the Global Agenda Council of the World Economic Forum. And so Hans and I have known each other from a long time back, have worked together very closely, both in his role as a physician at Pfizer and also as an expert in demography. And so really, really happy, Hans, that you were willing to join us today to enlighten us with your insights on demography and its impact on the world. And then also Nick Eberstadt. Nick Eberstadt is an American political economist who holds the Henry Wendt Chair in Political Economy at the American Enterprise Institute, a very well-known political think tank. He's also a senior advisor to the National Bureau of Asian Research, and he's a member of the visiting committee at the Harvard School of Public Health, and a member of the Global Leadership Council at the World Economic Forum. He's the author of numerous books and reports, and he obtained his degrees up to PhD at Harvard, and also holds an MSc degree from the London School of Economics. So as you can see, we have two great experts who will talk about this subject in great depth and share their knowledge with us today. And I would encourage you to ask many questions, because we don't have many times the opportunity to talk with experts of this caliber. At the bottom here, I will not read them, but you see a few disclaimers. You can read them at your leisure. And then we will go on to the next slide. So living longer across the world, what do we know today? And especially, what does it mean? What does it mean for society? What does it mean for geopolitics? And what does it mean also for business, and particularly also for healthcare and pharma? That's really what we want to talk about today. And we will take you through first a presentation where our experts will provide some of the background that perhaps not everybody is aware of. And after that level setting, we will have a discussion. So on the next slide then, we will have the first question. So just to see a little bit where our audience is at, how long would you like to live? And on the next slide, you see the different possibilities. So we're not in Aubrey de Grey territory of living more than 1,000 years. We're taking it slowly, one step at a time. So would you like to live till 80 years of age, 90, 100, 120, 150? Well, if we can put up the poll, we'll get your opinions here. Quite an interesting distribution here. What jumps out a little bit here is that we have a mixture of realists and people who really are very hopeful to live quite a long time. 21% wanting to live 150 years of age is quite an achievement here. And we'll see, Hans actually will address some of the issues related to aging longer than 100 years of age, as you will see later on. But thank you very much for providing this poll. So demographic change, of course, is with us. The people are very aware of a few things that have happened. So we have a huge impact, of course, of longevity. People are living longer. And not that long ago, I was at a presentation by the American Federation for Aging Research, where Nir Barzilai showed a number of pictures of people at the same age over time. And so a picture of Darwin, for instance, and then over time working up to the modern time. And when you see a picture of Darwin, he in that picture, which is a very famous one, where he sits down at his desk, has a white beard and so on, he looks like 80 years old, but actually he's 47. So it's not only that people live longer, but also live longer better today. So longevity has a huge impact on demographic change. And then fertility, we're all very well aware of the downward trend in fertility, although as Hans will point out to us, that has a different evolution in different parts of the world with some surprising results. And then also we have the effect of migration, which is quite unpredictable, as we have seen in the surge in migration to Europe, for instance, in 2015, followed by a downward trajectory. But as I mentioned, this is quite unpredictable. And this then is part of a number of mega trends, globalization, urbanization, and climate change, and also the availability of resources. The next slide. So a few things about demography, and a few things that people have said. Demography is like gravity. It's just there. Meaning that it is something that we are not always aware of, but definitely need to take into account when we make decisions. It's difficult to plan demography, but you can definitely prepare to capture its opportunities. So some countries have tried to plan for demography with varying success, China with its one-child policy, for instance, but in general, it's very difficult to do this. But what we can really do is to prepare to capture its opportunities. In this case, the opportunity of longevity, for instance. Next slide. Napoleon said that to know a nation's geography is to know its foreign policy. And he was actually very much at the receiving end of that when he faced his defeat in his campaign in Russia, for instance. But he definitely was a victim of Russia's geography. But the WDA Forum has, inspired by this saying, really has turned this around into knowing a nation's demography means knowing its future. And so we ignore demography at our peril. And we meaning countries, organizations, international organizations, and business. We really need to incorporate demography into our overall strategy and what we're trying to do with our business. And this is part of what this talk, and actually a series of talks, is about. Next slide. So as you can see, there are major changes into population growth. You can see here, for instance, the population growth in Asia, which then after 2050 reverses. The tremendous growth in Africa, and also then the changes in the different continents, meaning that population growth is different, demography is different in different parts of the world, with different consequences for politics, for economy, and for business. And I would now like to turn it over to Hans on the next slide. Hans.
Good morning from Switzerland. Good afternoon, or whatever time you have. And it's a real privilege that I can share our long experience we had on global demography and global longevity. And before I start to go in more details, I just want to summarize with you, where are we today in terms of global demography? As we are sitting or watching the screen at the moment, approximately 7.8 billion people live on our planet, and they increase every year by about 80 million, which is the population size of Germany. There are many other facts about demography, but I would like to emphasize on two. You should also know, and this is important in relation to health, about 55% of all global citizens live in urban areas, and the trend is increasing. And what do we know about longevity? The average longevity, the average lifespan, all across the world is currently 70 years. However, there is a huge difference, It's less than 70 years in developing countries and clearly above 80 in developed countries. So there is a wide range, and this is as well important to know when we view longevity in conjunction or in relation with healthcare efforts. The next one, please. I shared with you the item, the topic life expectancy. And life expectancy is not equally distributed across the globe. There are some hotspots where people live longer. There are some areas where people live average lives, and there are some areas which have tremendous potential for improvements. Now let's start with the areas of improvement. And as you can see on this slide, the yellow areas is where life expectancy is on average between 60 and 65, and this is Africa and Afghanistan. And you will not be surprised about this. And on the other side, you will see areas where life expectancy is very high. This is in total is Northern America, many areas of Latin America, Europe, and Australia, Japan, and now with huge speed picking up China. These are the hotspots or the areas where life expectancy is at the moment at the highest, again with ongoing improvements. And this change in life expectancy will as well shape the future of our globe. The next one, please. If I would like to draw a picture on the future of our planet till 2001. So for the next 80 years, and you see here the various continents by population, you will see three different messages. Number one is Africa will dominate the population increase in the 21st century. It might be surprising that Asia is about to reach its population size in this century. And the reason is that already China is starting to diminish its population size. And by 2050, 60, India, as then the biggest country in the world, will as well start to stagnate or even decrease. And then there are other countries like North America and Europe. They are areas which definitely will not have significant population increase. It will stagnate, and as in the case of Europe, independent of migration, population might shrink. And there are many areas in Europe or countries where we have forecast that population will shrink by 30, 40, 50% in the next 50 years. And this is mainly in Eastern Europe. So the next one, since our topic is longevity all around the world, I give you some more figures about the number of elderly people. And elderly people, these longer living citizens are defined in this slide as people who are 65 plus. And 65 plus, according as well to your forecast, if you want to become 100, these are groups of people who live very, very high likelihood for another 30, 35 years. That's a whole lot. And you can see that this is as well quite important for the industry. The hugest absolute increase in elderly people will be in Asia. In Europe or in the US, you will have aging on a very high level, and these elderly groups represent an enormous proportion of the entire society. Around about 20 to 25% of these people in these countries will be 65 plus. So elderly people will dominate or influence and shape in terms of demand all over the world, but the quantities are different. The next one. If I summarize these for the continents and to give you some more detailed numbers, and let me start with Africa. In Africa, by 2060, in the next 40 years, you will have elderly cohorts which are at least 200 million people. This is half the size of the US. If you go to Asia, and I just go to China, if I go to Asia, by 2060, they will have 1.2 billion people aged 65 plus. This is exactly the size of population of Africa as of today. They have today 1.2 billion. And in Europe, you will have a shrinking working age population, and you will have huge increases of elderly populations. And in North America, you as well have an increase in elderly cohorts and a stagnation of the working population, but not such as a speed as in Europe. And then you have different patterns in Latin America and Oceania. And if I go to the next slide, you will see it in more qualitative figures. In Europe, because they are already so old, in the next 10 years, the elderly will increase by only 20%. In North Africa, because the level is so low, they will increase by 30 to 40% from a very low level. But then you see as well the enormous increase in Asia in elderly people, except Japan. Why is this happen? Because Japan, they are already above 65 to a high proportion. They cannot add very much. And then you have the other dynamics in other countries. To summarize this slide is, there's all across the world a significant, impactful increase in elderly age cohorts. However, depending on the time horizon, it will be very, very different. And these differences have huge political, economic, and as well healthcare provision impact. The next one, please. So if I summarize this, and you see this on this picture, if we all live longer, our journey becomes longer. Our journey of life becomes longer. And aging and longevity are realities all across the world. The changes it will cause on business, politics, and societies are unprecedented. And so far, we have only very, very limited knowledge and expertise how to tackle these challenges. But I can tell you as well, these challenges will affect us on an individual level, on a societal level, and on an economic level. The next one is, the next one, please. Now, I have demonstrated, I've shared with you that we will live longer. And the goal of this journey is that aging longevity has to be a success. So we have, or we should aim for ways to capture benefits of living longer or longer lifespan. And for this, we have these, this slide illustrates, to make aging a success, you need 4 drivers. And these are, number 1, education. Number 2 is health. You need to be healthy. You need an economy who understands a changing society and finds a way to untap new ways of human capital. And finally, you need governments who give the right frame to make the advantages out of this. And if these 4 wheels interact together successfully, you can create a benefit or a dividend out of longevity. And that's what we aim for, or should aim for. And this is as well the purpose of this meeting today, that we understand this and work together how to develop a benefit, a bonus or a dividend from living longer. Next one, please. Paul, can you?
Thank you very much, Hans. Thank you very much, Hans, and thanks so much for pointing out, some of the data related to this, which is not always very well known and very impressive. And this is, of course, what's happening in Africa, right? That where we have a tremendous increase in the population and in the working population, but also at the same time, in absolute numbers, we have a significant increase also in people over 65 in the next 80 years or so. And in Asia, where we have potential issue where population can become old or older before reaching a certain economic level. Now, so we talked about the 4 enablers. Now, what are the challenges here? And we've picked out 4 for you, and we would like you to vote on what is the most important challenge related to living longer. And there may be others than the 4 that we have picked, but we just wanted to get your opinion on what is on the next slide. So please go ahead. Thank you very much. I must say, as expected, health came out as the most important challenge, and the pensions, independence, very important, of course. As one gets older, it's very important to be able to live in a dignified manner, independently, as long as possible. A little bit surprised, though, that social contact was not mentioned, because loneliness in older age is a real problem. But of course, we've asked you to rank them, and you have done so by choosing health as the most important problem, which is right into the theme of this chat, really. So on the next slide, then, Hans, you want to take us through this poll that was done, and that basically shows very similar results.
Yeah, basically, it's not the first time we talk about this topic, and each time we ask people, how old do you want to become? And usually, if you give this talk in Switzerland, the response is 95, which is quite similar to what you said. And the other thing, then when we ask him what will be the biggest challenge in a long life or in a 100-year life, and then we constantly, and this is a screenshot from such a questionnaire, people say by far the most important thing with longevity is health. And people then say as well, we don't want to live longer or long, we are not healthy. So the key driver or the goal or vision should be not longevity, it should be healthy longevity. And therefore this is totally connected to health. And this is the business, or this is our duty, where we have to be creative to make a contribution. The next one, please. So when we agreed that health is the key and most important driver or shaper for longevity, we have to understand what do we understand under health. And it is our understanding, when we try to advance or improve health, is that health is not just health. Health has multiple or 4 dimensions. And on one hand, the classical one is the physical health. Then the next one is the mental health. Then the spiritual health and the social health. And these 4 drivers, they make the difference. They make the way towards a healthy, longer life, or the strategy to add life to longevity. And the next one, please. And now we come closer to our industry, our business. Health is the destination. That's where we want to go to. On the other hand, we are becoming older, or we live longer or longer. And then we have our bodies or our organs. And there's the phenomenon that starting from the age of 30, for example, that our organs start to decline 1% per year already at the age of 20. And then you run in a situation that if you live longer, that your organs are no longer capable to work as longer or not as long as you live. Therefore, and I give you one example from one organ now. The next one, please. And then I come to some conclusions. What you see here, that kidneys, and as you know this, they decline over time. And if you live longer, it is by definition, it will happen. The longer people live, the more chronic kidney failure you will have, and the more dialysis you will have in a society with many people living for 100 years. And this is, for one part of the medicine, of medical care, a huge challenge where now the nephrologists start thinking about this. Now, if mankind lives longer, and the destination could not be just to do more dialysis, the destination could only be, how could we prepare nephrology that kidneys deteriorate in their function at a slower pace? So prolonging kidney function with new medicines, new preventive medicines, or new lifestyle strategies. And this is one example of medical care, where medical care has to adopt, to reinvent itself in an environment where people live longer, or in an area of longevity. And in this area of longevity, many medical disciplines cannot operate like people only will live till 60 or 70. So we will have, the next one, please. We need to discuss a new future of healthcare. And this is why we are very happy to discuss this today with you. Because the future of healthcare will be, number one, finding new ways to preventing diseases. The future of healthcare must find ways to take benefit of the longevity by reducing morbidity. The future of healthcare because it has to work longer, has to improve or increase in efficiency. And last but not least, in a long-living society, we have to find ways that access will be available always. Access always. So in these dimensions, we have to reinvent, to advance medical care or healthcare, to reach the destiny living longer in good health, or with good health. And now I come to the next one. To manage healthcare our lives for much longer times, we have to as well reinvent our lifespans, our schedule, how we live. And it is one of the proposals of the World Demographic Aging Forum that the future of our life is not the classical design, childhood, youth, employment, retirement, and we have to adjust to a new life, or to have to invent managing our new life design, which is a flexible model with various phases of activities over a longer life, and with phases which allow to make economic contributions over longer time. But however, this is only possible if one prerequisite is given, and this is health. So this is my position from the moment. longevity needs health, and the health is important to make longevity a success, but health is as well important to maintain our human capital so that we can finance our longer lives. So it's as well has a financial aspect. And I brought this in now from the demographic health point of view with some medical input. And I would like to hand over now to Nick, who will comment living longer across the world and introduce from his view as a political economist, the geopolitical dimension of longevity. Nick, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Hans.
Can we have the next slide, please?
Thank you very much, Hans. I'm delighted to be here today, and I'd like to share some political economy and demographic perspectives with you on some of the realities that are transforming our existence and some of the opportunities, but also challenges that these are going to pose. Can we see the next slide, please? This is homework not from me, but from Dr. James Valpol, the founder of the Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research in Rostock, Germany. It's a terribly important finding that Valpol presents here, because it puts the improvement in life expectancy that the world is now enjoying in much greater historical perspective. What he shows in this slide is the highest living, the longest life expectancy at birth, female population in the world from 1840 to about 2017. This is almost 180 years. And the longest living population changes over time. It may be Australia at one point, Iceland at another, Japan at another. Today, it happens to be the population of Hong Kong. But what you can see is that for almost 2 centuries, we have charted virtually a straight line upward, with life expectancy increasing about 3 months each year over the course of the 19th, the 20th, and now the 21st centuries, for the longest living population in the world. And of course, there has been great debate over the past century about what the limit to human lifespan might be. Brute facts on the ground have broken the barriers that people have hypothesized about again and again and again. Now, perhaps we are finally heading towards the species barrier. That may be true. On the other hand, if this line continues into the future, we'd be seeing a life expectancy of 90 for women somewhere in the world before the end of this decade. And we'd be seeing a life expectancy of 100 someplace in the world by the year 2050. Let's look at the next slide, please. We've all been in this process of modern economic development, which has transformed humanity over the last 2 centuries. And while every country remains unique in many of its own characteristics, we can see, we know already, that the world's income levels have soared, life expectancy has soared, education has dramatically increased, and today's picture of developing countries offers, in some meaningful sense, a vision of the future for lower income countries that will be undergoing the same process of development. I mention this because I think the same thing is true for high life expectancy countries today. Their patterns offer a prospective vision of the future for lower life expectancy countries. That's why I'm taking the historical record here of Sweden, one of the countries that enjoys the longest life expectancy in the world at this moment. Sweden has wonderful demographic records. We can trace back the population rhythms of Sweden for a quarter of a millennium and more. And what we can see here is that as health increases, as life expectancy increases, this gain is not due solely to drops in infant mortality or drops in child mortality. There is a transformation in the odds of living to very long, historically speaking, remarkably long lives. You can see here, for example, what's happened with the odds of living to the age of 90. That's the green line on this chart. And these are real existing people. This is a tracking of people who were actually born in Sweden in 1928. You can see that they now live almost, they've got a 30% odd of making it to age 90. If we look at the life tables, life tables for a country, for a place like Hong Kong, these are conditional, not historical. They're a snapshot. But at this point in Hong Kong, women have an over 50% chance of reaching age 90 in life tables there. On this track, it may be that in the future, there will be populations, maybe many populations, where the odds of living to age 100 will be close to 50-50 or above 50-50. This gets to Hans's point that we are at a juncture where we need to start reimagining life course. It's one thing to expect your life course will be 65 years or the biblical blessing of 70. Quite another to think about 100 years. Final slide, please. So this slide shows both a blessing and a challenge. What I've put together here is some historical data on the first country to reach the life expectancy of 70, the life expectancy of 75, and the life expectancy of 80, and what their income level, their national income level was at the time. And to compare that today with some countries at the same life expectancy levels. And you will see that today, Nepal, for example, enjoys a life expectancy of 70, experiences a life expectancy of 70, but at less than 1/4 of the income level that Sweden had when it attained that life expectancy. Honduras is a 1/5 of the life expectancy of the income level of Switzerland, when Switzerland attained a life expectancy of 75. And similarly, Costa Rica, which now has a life expectancy of 80, has an income level which is only a fraction of Japan's. When Japan hit that threshold a generation ago. So, on the one hand, we can, so to speak, purchase much longer lives for contemporary populations than we could in the past. On the other hand, we have much lower levels of productivity in these populations to sustain longer living populations. And a life expectancy calculation is an individual calculation. The social calculation has to do with the proportion of total population, let's say over the age of 65. This is an additional consideration I didn't put into these slides, but the proportion of countries with older populations has much more to do with birth rates than with life expectancy. If you squeeze the base of a population pyramid, you will end up with, necessarily, with a larger share of people in the older age groups. And this means that with the global march to low fertility or sub-replacement fertility that my friend and colleague Hans Groth was describing, we also have a demographic squeeze, which is pushing all societies outside of sub-Sahara at the moment towards pronounced population aging. So longer lives, more population aging on lower incomes than in the past. This is the challenge and the opportunity that we face today as a global human prospect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Some great insight here. Can we move to the next slide, please? Our final question is, what is the role of the pharmaceutical industry in this? And we will develop that theme also in a subsequent session at a later time this year. But just go into the different options here on the next slide. Thank you. So one might think that there's no role for pharma in the topic of longevity, or it might be just limited to ensuring that drugs are tested also in older adults, and that is not a small task. A lot of our drugs, drug trials historically have excluded older adults. And so now we're faced, of course, with, for some of our drugs, with a lack of information on how they behave in older adults with multiple diseases and polypharmacy. Or perhaps the role is to develop drugs specifically for older adults, or drugs to prevent aging. And actually, there's a couple of questions on prevention already in the Q&A. Should we develop drugs to stop aging, or should we develop drugs to reverse aging? So again, we're forcing you to choose one. So please go ahead.
And while they're doing this, Paul, there are lots of questions coming, and we're approaching close to the hour. Let's pick up some of them, and we will collate some later on and come back to the panel.
Yeah, so maybe while we're voting, we can discuss the questions then, Praveen. Is that what you're mentioning?
Why not? Thank you.
Yeah. So Nick, the question which is right into your bailiwick, I think, there's actually two questions on COVID-19. What impact does COVID-19 have on population curves? And we actually have the example there of Italy, for instance, where there seems to be a significant impact, at least at this time, especially in the region of Bergamo, for instance, very famous for the first wave of COVID.
So, of course, COVID-19 has been a terrible demographic shock, in addition to everything else we can say about it. Demographers like to deal with nice, neat, regular, long-term patterns, of course, but the reality of the world is that we have disasters that shake these long-term patterns all the time. The biggest post-war shock to the world's population was China's famine after Mao's Great Leap Forward, which was such a mortality shock that it changed the world's entire tempo of population growth for a number of years. The COVID disaster is undercounted, as we all know. The mortality from COVID has been undercounted almost everywhere, but we see the excess mortality figures. It's a shock But I think maybe I'm being optimistic, but I think we can say it's a short-term shock. It raises mortality, it lowers fertility. The biggest impact in the developed countries were likely last year. The impact in the developing countries will continue this year and possibly the next. I don't think we will see this as appreciably altering long-term trajectories. I hope I am right about that.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. Hans, the question on migration. To what extent is migration likely to change the regional demographic predictions that you presented?
We have, in terms of migration, we have in demography, we have three drivers of change or influences. This number one are fertility rates, number two is mortality or longevity, and migration. And out of these three ones, migration is the one who is really difficult to predict because it changes all of a sudden in an unpredictable way the patterns. But this is a general statement. The fact is that we have migration all across the world from continents to continents, and it's about 250 million people a year who leave the place of origin or the place where they have been born. And looking into the future and into the picture, the slide I've shared with you, on our planet, where do people live in the 21st century? The largest area of insecurity in terms of potential migration will be Africa and or people leaving out of Africa. And now you don't only have to look at on your map or the globe, then you can easily depict which other areas of the world will be the ones who will be most influenced, shaped, or impacted by this. It's a huge fear in Europe.
Great. Thank you very much, Hans. We also have a question from one of the participants, which I was really glad to see, is 93 years old and has a great question on prevention and the importance of prevention. So the real question is, to what extent is early intervention in diet, exercise, and work habits important? Well, it is incredibly important. And there's a big education effort needed. Here we talk about more the impact on the pharma industry, but in general on the healthcare system. As you know, less than 1% of healthcare spend is on prevention. And that in the background of this increasing longevity, it is absolutely essential that we increase our spend and our attention on prevention. And in parallel to that, one of the missions of the American Federation for Aging Research is also to study the biology of aging and to see where we can intervene in the aging process early on. So two things. One, the clean living that you're talking about, incredibly important. Really need much more investment on prevention. And then secondly, also the research into the phenomenon and the biology of aging itself is very important as well. And then we have another question related to the crisis in care that we are living today, where elderly care is mainly performed by women, and in some countries like the US and some European countries, provided by ethnic and racial minorities. So with that in mind and the increasing population over 65, what does the future of care look like? And maybe, Hans, you have some aspects of this, and Nick, if you want to jump in as well.
The future of care is, for me, that you have a proactive follow-up of the health status of people living longer. I give you an example. What do we know over longer times of the lung functions? What do we know over long times of blood sugar or diabetes? And if we really want to have prevention, we need a long-term management, long-term monitoring, and proactive action if these values change in whatever direction. It's a more long-term view on healthcare provision.
Great, thank you, Nick.
If we think about the what we might call the social production of health, the medical system and the healthcare system play an indispensable role, but they are not the foundation of this. Lifestyle, education, social connections, we might call social capital. Paul, this got to your question of loneliness earlier. All of these are absolutely critical, and we get into trouble when we're in a position where the medical system or the health system is forced to substitute for things that should be coming, so to speak, from that other sector, from the lifestyle sector, from the social sector. I mean, medical innovation and healthcare systems have a great deal to add, but the platform is elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nick. And that actually ties into another question that we have, which you addressed at the same time, related to an article by Atul Gawande on the system in Costa Rica, which I all encourage you to Google and to read. Very interesting article, and thank you very much for suggesting this. So we have a couple more questions. I don't know, Praveen, if we can go over a couple of minutes or...
We can. I was just mindful of our folks in Asia who are hanging on at this time. Yeah. But I think you are leaving it a good. So why don't we take one top of mind, and you also got the post results. And then what we promised to do is to come back with some of the responses to the other questions.
Yes, okay, very good. And so so the last question that I would like to address is that of brain health. And Hans, you talked about the impact of aging on the different organ systems and also on the different aspects of health, right? Mental health, physical health, etc. And this is kind of an interplay of mental and physical when we talk about Alzheimer and Parkinson's and these type of diseases, which can have a major impact. So any insight in this, the importance of brain health and the impact on aging?
One comment, as I'm sitting here and talking, since I'm as well a medical doctor, I'm currently as well vaccinating people here. And my first task beginning in January was vaccinating people above 80. And what you can see, the mental status from people beyond 80 has such an unexplainable diversity. So any future efforts is, if you really take it serious or mean it very honestly with healthy living or healthy longevity, we must find ways either through medicines, behaviors, to maintain mental health as long, stable, productive, or prevented from unwanted deteriorations. And the worst thing is dementia, you know, and the proportions of people suffering sometimes are really significant. And you know as well the figures that our investments from public health, R&D, from the industry in mental health is much too low, particularly if you compare to oncology. And I think this is something we have to change, because otherwise, if you see our longevity numbers, they will hit us very hard then.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Hans. And also as someone
not only in Japan or in some, and as Nick put it, is the new challenge is increasingly no longer rich nations age, as well less rich ones, and this can turn out as well in the if
We seem to have a little bit of a connection problem for Hans, but Hans, thank you so much. Some very important information here. So, and thank you everyone for these fabulous questions, which really point to many of the different problems and different facets of longevity and its impact on society and health and on the economic and political aspects as well. So the results of the poll, very realistic crowd today, looking at getting more information about how drugs behave in older adults, perhaps looking at developing drugs specifically for older adults and preventing aging, and less so stopping or reversing aging. And thank you very much for that. And we'll develop those themes, as I mentioned earlier, in a subsequent discussion as well, to which you're all cordially invited. So maybe I'll turn it over to Praveen then.
Thank you, Paul. As we've seen already, this has engendered so much interest, and in fact, our audience has also stayed on for this duration, also anticipating in the future. So, what clearly the faculty has already brought up that this conversation today offers hope that good science, good policy, and good business practices shall see us through these tumultuous times. We will address COVID, we will realities, the vagaries of life today, into a future that offers living longer, healthier, and more gracefully. As Paul alluded to, we would like to garner all these feedback, and this poll question leads us well into the next session. So please be prepared, Paul and team, and Nick and Hans. And all that remains for me now is to thank all of you to have brought in this invaluable perspective, both from the science part, the historical part, the policy part, and Nick, also the influencing factors that as we go along into the future. So on that very positive note, I'd also like to thank the audience for participating today, for giving these questions, and also leading us to the next chapter of being able to align together to live more graceful lives. Thank you once again, and also it will behoove me to also thank the operations team to be able to have put this together. And on that happy note, thanks for all for participating, and a big thank you to the faculty, Paul, Hans, Nick. Thanks for being there, and thanks for giving us hope for the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Take care. Goodbye, everyone, and have a lovely day wherever you are.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks. Thank you. Bye-bye.